you ever watched the news and then talked to somebody about the same event and thought, were they even watching the same thing? Because somehow you saw one story and they saw another. And here's the part I really want you to understand. Nobody necessarily needed to be lying. That's what makes media bias so powerful. You can be given facts, actual facts, and still walk away with a completely distorted understanding of what happened. And that's because someone decided which facts you would see and which ones you wouldn't, which words would surround those facts, and which images you would see over and over again. Once you understand how this works, you're going to start seeing news very differently. And I'm going to show you exactly what to look for. I'm Kimberly Palermo, and I'm an educator and author of the book Indoctri-Nation 365, Taking Racial Responsibility in Post-Truth America. And I've spent years trying to understand a question that I think has become increasingly important in this country. How can millions of Americans live in the same nation, experience the same events, and come away believing completely different versions of reality? Media is not the only reason this happens, but it's a big part of the puzzle. And I want to make something very clear before we go any further. This is not just a Fox News problem. It's not just an MSNBC problem. It's not simply a conservative problem or even a liberal problem. Every source makes choices. The question isn't, is there bias? The question is rather, can I recognize it when it happens? So let's look at 4 ways it happens. The first form of bias happens before you ever read a headline, and that is because somebody decides what's news, what's important. Think about this. Imagine 10,000 people attending a demonstration, mostly peaceful marching. 20 people break windows. Now imagine 2 television networks arrive. Network A spends most of its coverage showing thousands of people marching perfectly, peacefully, in harmony. Network B repeatedly shows broken windows over and over and over. Did Network A show you something that wasn't true? No. Did Network B show you something that wasn't true? No. But did they tell you the same story? Absolutely not. Our audience may walk away thinking, thousands of Americans are peacefully demanding change, and that's a beautiful thing. And another may walk away thinking, our cities are being destroyed. My God, what's happening? Both audiences saw real images. That's why media literacy requires something more than just asking, is this technically true? We also have to ask, is this representative of the entire story? And there's another kind of selection bias that's even harder to recognize. The stories you've never heard of at all, because you can't question information you were never given. So think about what didn't make the news. Sometimes that's one of the most important questions we can ask. What am I not being shown? Now, let's say 2 outlets cover exactly the same event. They can still change the story simply by changing the language. Listen to these words: demonstrators, activists, agitators, a rioting mob. Those words are not interchangeable emotionally. They create a picture in your mind. Consider these words: government spending versus public investment. Same dollars, very different emotional picture. Think of this one: police responded versus police cracked down. Again, words do something. And here's what fascinates me about this. Very often, you feel the visual message before you consciously even analyze it. That's why I like to say you feel it before you think it. Language can tell you who the hero is, who the villain is, who deserves your sympathy, who you should be afraid of, who belongs, and who doesn't. And once that emotional picture has been established, every fact afterwards is interpreted through it. That's incredibly important when we're talking about race, immigration, poverty, crime, protest, politics, or any other issue where Americans already carry a deeply rooted belief. Because the journalist doesn't have to tell you what to think. Sometimes the way the picture is framed does all the talking for them. Here's another question. Why do you know certain stories almost instantly while other enormous stories seem to barely register? It's called repetition. A story leads the broadcast. Then it is discussed by a panel. Then you see a clip of it. Then you see another clip. Then it's on social media. Then someone reacts to the reaction. And pretty soon the story feels enormous. Meanwhile, other stories receive 30 seconds, maybe one article, and they disappear. That's important because what receives attention begins to feel important to us. And what disappears from our information environment becomes easy to forget. Notice I didn't say there has to be someone sitting in a room saying, let's manipulate people. There doesn't. News organizations make decisions all the time about time, space, audiences, competition, rating, relevance, and countless other things. But those decisions still shape what the rest of us spend our time thinking about. That's the distinction I want you to understand. Bias doesn't always require an evil intent. Sometimes bias is simply the result of making choices. This might be the most important one of all, context. Imagine I tell you, this neighborhood has a poverty problem. Okay, but why? What happened there? What policies affected the neighborhood? What jobs disappeared? What schools were funded or underfunded? Who was able to buy property there? Who wasn't? What happened 20 years ago? What happened 50 years ago? What happened 100 years ago? Without context, we take the results of a long historical process and make it look simply like it appeared yesterday. And that is especially dangerous when we talk about racial inequality. Because if you remove the history, systems start looking like individual failures. Inequity begins looking inevitable, and consequences get confused with causes. This is one of the reasons I became obsessed with hidden history while writing Indoctri-Nation 365. I kept discovering things and thinking, why didn't I already know this? And then an even more important question came about. What conclusions have I reached because I didn't know something? That's the question I want all of us asking, not because we're stupid, not to make us feel guilty, but because we're human. We construct our understanding of the world from the information we're given. So we need to become much better investigators. So here's something practical. The next time you see a political story, a racial controversy, a protest, an immigration story, anything that immediately makes you angry, frightened, triumphant, don't immediately share it. Give yourself 60 seconds and ask 3 questions. Question 1, what is the actual fact underneath this story? Strip away the commentary, strip away the adjectives, strip away the outrage. What actually happened? And whenever possible, can I find the original document, video, court decision, study, or transcript, or another primary source? Question 2, what is shaping my emotional reaction? Look at the headlines, look at the photographs, the adjectives, listen to the music if it's television or video. Ask yourself, what part of this is information and what part of this is framing a picture? Question 3, what's missing? Is there context that I don't know about? Are there other perspectives that aren't binary, maybe somewhere in a gray area? What happened immediately before the clip and after the clip? Is this one example being presented as though it's representing thousands or millions of people, or is this a one-time thing? Could I look at another credible source and learn something this one didn't tell me? Those 3 questions can completely change the way you consume information. What happened? How is it being presented? And what is missing? Remember those 3 things. Here's a challenge for you, and I want you to do it right now, today if you can. Take one story you care a lot about, one that makes you emotional. Then look at 3 different news perspectives and how they cover it. Just go do it right now, especially including one source you normally would never choose to watch. Don't just ask which one agrees with me. Look at the headlines, the photos, the facts that appear near the top. Look at the ones that are left out, and then ask yourself something that is surprisingly difficult. Did I learn anything that complicated what I originally believed? Maybe something that was left out. That is critical thinking. Critical thinking does not mean you have to distrust everyone and everything and just give up. It means refusing to surrender your thinking to anyone else but you. And I think we desperately need more critical thinking right about now, because democracy doesn't require all of us to agree with each other. But it does require us to have some of the same shared reality. And if we're going to build on that, we have to become much more conscious of how our reality is being constructed. If this video gave you something new to think about, please subscribe, because this is exactly what we're going to keep doing on this channel. We're going to keep questioning what we inherited. We're going to uncover the history that many of us were never taught. And we're going to look at propaganda and misinformation. And most importantly, we're going to learn how to recognize manipulation before somebody else does our thinking for us. Tell me, what's a news story you saw and covered differently depending on where you watched it? Put it in the comments. I may choose some of your examples for a future video, and we'll break them down together. If you want to go much deeper into how history, race, power, propaganda, and the beliefs we all inherited fit together, that's exactly why I wrote my book, Indoctri-Nation 365. Taking Racial Responsibility in Post-Truth America. You can read the first 50 pages at indoctrination365.com, because the truth was never lost. It was never taught.